Darius Coleman liked keeping to himself. He wasn't the type to get into drama or cause trouble. He worked from home, minded his own business, and enjoyed his quiet life in his small neighborhood. But everything changed one evening when his internet started acting up. First. He thought it was just a normal issue. Maybe his router needed a reset. But as he checked his Wi-Fi settings, something strange caught his eye. A device he didn't recognize was connected to his network. The name was odd, something like Crestwood I1. He didn't own anything by that name. Who or what was on his internet? Feeling uneasy, Darius decided to take action. He changed his password, making sure no one but him could connect. But as he stepped outside to check the router, he had no idea that his simple action was about to spark a chain reaction. Across the street, Melanie Foster, one of his neighbors, noticed him. She didn't know what he was doing, but instead of asking, she jumped to conclusions. Within minutes, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Hello? I'd like to report a suspicious man outside. I think he might be up to something. Darius had no clue what was coming next. Darius had just finished resetting his router when he heard something behind him. At first, it was just footsteps, quick, heavy steps coming from the sidewalk. Then, before he could turn around, a loud voice cut through the air. Hands where I can see them. Darius froze. His heart pounded as he slowly turned his head. Two police officers stood just a few feet away, their hands hovering over their holsters. Flashing red and blue lights lit up the street, and neighbors peeked from their windows. "Sir, step away from the device," one officer ordered. Confused, Darius glanced at his Wi-Fi router. "What? This? It's just my step away." Now, the officer's tone was firm. Darius lifted his hands, his mind racing. Why were they here? What did they think he was doing? Then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted Melanie Foster, his neighbor, standing on her porch with her phone still in hand. She was the one who called the cops. But why? "I live here," Darius said, keeping his voice calm. "This is my house. My internet wasn't working, so I came out to check my router." The officers exchanged glances. One of them, a tall man with a stern expression, stepped closer. "We got a report of suspicious activity. A neighbor said you were tampering with something outside." Darius clenched his jaw. Suspicious activity? Checking his own Wi-Fi? He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "That something is my internet router," he said. "I'm just trying to fix it." But the officers didn't lower their guard. Instead, one of them reached for his radio. Darius suddenly realized this wasn't over. Darius took a deep breath, keeping his hands up. He knew that one wrong move could make things worse. "Look," he said carefully, "I can show you my ID. I live right here." The taller officer, Officer Grant, narrowed his eyes. "Turn around. Hands behind your head." Darius hesitated. "For what? I haven't done anything wrong." Before he could say more, Officer Hayes, the second cop, grabbed his wrist and spun him around. The cold metal of handcuffs snapped onto his wrists. "Hey, what are you doing?" Darius protested, his pulse racing. "You match the description of a suspect we're looking for," Officer Grant said. Darius frowned. "What suspect? What crime?" Neither officer answered. Instead, they pulled him toward the patrol car. Just then, the front door of Darius's house burst open. His younger sister, Tiana, ran outside. "Stop! That's my brother. He lives here," she shouted. Officer Grant turned to her. "Stay back, ma'am. This doesn't concern you." Tiana's eyes filled with panic. "Doesn't concern me? You're arresting my brother for no reason." Darius's heart pounded as he looked around. The neighbors were watching, but no one spoke up. Then he saw her, his mother, Lisa Carter, stepping out of a black SUV. She wasn't just his mom. She was Special Agent Lisa Carter of the FBI. And from the look on her face, she wasn't playing games. Lisa Carter stepped out of the SUV, her sharp eyes locked on the officers. She moved with authority, her heels clicking against the pavement. "What exactly is going on here?" she demanded, her voice calm but firm. Officer Grant turned to her. "Ma'am, Please step back. This is police business. Lisa folded her arms. Oh, I'm sure it is. But you're making a big mistake. Officer Hayes scoffed. And who are you, exactly? She reached into her jacket and pulled out a badge. Special Agent Lisa Carter, FBI. Both officers froze. The neighbors who'd been watching gasped. Lisa stepped closer, her eyes cold. Now, why is my son in handcuffs? Darius, still cuffed, felt a wave of relief. They said I matched some suspect. Lisa turned to the officers. Really? What's the suspect's name? What crime was committed? Officer Grant hesitated. We got a report about a break-in. The suspect was a young black male. Lisa's jaw tightened. That's all you had? No description? No proof? Officer Hayes shifted uncomfortably. We were just following protocol. Lisa stepped right up to him. Then let me teach you a new protocol. Uncuff my son. Now, the officers exchanged nervous glances before Officer Grant finally pulled out the key. The cuffs clicked open. Lisa leaned in, lowering her voice just enough for them to hear. You just tried to arrest an innocent young man and the mother you disrespected? She's the one who could have your badges. Both officers paled. Darius rubbed his wrists. He was free, but the lesson was just beginning. The street was silent as Lisa Carter stared down the two officers. Her presence alone made them uneasy. You thought you could get away with this, didn't you? She said, her voice steady but sharp. Officer Grant cleared his throat. It was a misunderstanding. Lisa cut him off. You cuffed my son with no real reason. If I wasn't here, would he be sitting in the back of your car right now? Or worse. The crowd murmured, whispering among themselves. Some even took out their phones, recording everything. Officer Hayes wiped his forehead. Look, Lisa held up her hand. Save it. You profiled him. You humiliated him. And you think just taking off the cuffs makes it all okay? Darius, still rubbing his wrists, shook his head. They didn't even tell me why they stopped me. Lisa's expression hardened. That's because they had no reason. She turned back to the officers. I'll be filing a full report. And trust me, I have connections that will make sure this doesn't get buried. Officer Grant swallowed hard. Ma'am, we didn't mean Lisa took a step closer. You didn't think? That's the problem. The officers exchanged a nervous glance. They knew this wasn't over. As Lisa and Darius walked back to their car, the weight of what had just happened hung in the air. The lesson had been given. Now, the consequences would follow. Jamal sat quietly in the back seat of his mom's car, his hands still tingling from the too tight handcuffs. His mother, Detective Simone Carter, gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. You okay? She finally asked, glancing at him. Jamal sighed. I guess. Just can't believe it happened. Simone took a deep breath. They thought they could treat you any way they wanted. They had no idea who they were messing with. Jamal turned to her. But what if you weren't there? What if he stopped himself, shaking his head? Simone's jaw tightened. That's exactly why this can't go ignored. Her phone buzzed. She checked the screen, her expression unreadable. The chief wants to meet. Right now? Jamal raised an eyebrow. That fast? Simone nodded. I told you I have connections. And I'm going to make sure they regret what they did today. Minutes later, they arrived at the police station. Simone marched inside, Jamal following close behind. Officers glanced their way, whispers spreading like wildfire. Everyone knew who she was. The chief stood waiting in his office. Detective Carter, he greeted stiffly. Simone didn't waste time. Your officers humiliated and wrongfully detained my son. And I want to know exactly what you're going to do about it. The chief sighed, rubbing his temples. We'll investigate. No, Simone interrupted. You'll take action. Because if you don't, I will. Jamal watched as the tension thickened. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The police chief sat behind his desk, his face unreadable. Across from him, Detective Simone Carter sat with her arms crossed. Her son, Jamal, stood beside her, his expression tense. "We take these accusations seriously," the chief said slowly. Simone leaned forward. "This wasn't an accusation. It was a fact. Your officers profiled my son, humiliated him, and almost ruined his future." The chief sighed. "Detective Carter, I understand you're upset," but Simone cut him off. "Upset? No, I'm beyond that. I want accountability." Jamal watched as the chief shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to being challenged like this. Finally, the chief cleared his throat. "The officers involved will be placed under review. We'll handle this properly." Simone wasn't satisfied. "That's not enough. I want a formal apology. I want training to make sure this doesn't happen again." She glanced at Jamal. "And I want my son's record cleared immediately." The chief hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. We'll take care of it." Jamal felt a weight lift off his shoulders. But his mom wasn't done. "One more thing," she added. "If I hear about anything like this happening again, I won't just come to your office. I'll take this public." The chief swallowed hard. "Understood." As they walked out, Jamal looked at his mom. "You didn't have to do all that for me." Simone smiled. "I'll always stand up for what's right." Jamal knew then this fight wasn't just for him. It was for everyone who had ever been in his shoes.